Learning from our mistakes can be one of the best ways to learn, but with something as unforgiving as self-custody, this can also be a really expensive lesson. That said, learning from others is also a really powerful tool, but given the incredibly strong survivorship bias in most content you see online, the tendency to blame users, and just the general shame associated with people who mess up, we often hear very few stories of where self-custody has gone wrong and the mistakes that people have made. So in this video, I'm going to share some insights around the types of issues that I see people struggling with the most often. This is going to include things that I see in both public forums, like the comment section on this channel, as well as private forums, like what happens in private sessions that I do with people, as well as trusted recoveries. And after running through the most common issues, I'll also just run through some learnings and general advice that I think has come out of this. It's also worth saying up front, I obviously will not be sharing specifics that would dox people, but rather I'll just be talking about general situations and the trends and things that I see along the way. So let's get into it. And if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe, and that way you can stay in the loop for content I make to help you find your way in the crazy and often hostile environment that is cryptocurrency. So first things first, what I've got here is just a quick summary of the different topics and themes that people request when they make a request through my paid support request form. This information is based off the last 800 requests that I received, and we'll just go through and talk about the major items on this list. So the first and most obvious issue that I deal with a lot are BIP39 passphrases. This is a huge part of why I firmly believe that BIP39 passphrase is an advanced feature. If you're using them, make sure you write them down. And the other key thing that I see is to make sure that before you send your entire stash to a passphrase protected wallet, just take the time to send a small transaction to that wallet, unplug everything, and then plug it all back in, enter the passphrase, and make sure you can send the funds. This process will generally require you to re-enter the passphrase. This is also a good spot just to mention some of the hardware devices that I see mentioned most often in my support requests. And the first thing you'll see here is Trezor is vastly overrepresented. The key thing though is that 3/4 of the Trezor users I've talked to over the last couple of years have been having passphrase issues. Simply put, when Trezor enabled BIP39 passphrase by default, when Trezor Suite launched a few years back, it was literally like someone had flicked a switch and carnage immediately ensued with users messing this up. The key thing to say here is that Trezor Suite will ask you to re-enter the passphrase if all the wallets it discovers are empty, but third-party wallets like MetaMask still don't. And again, this is also worth saying that half of the issues that I see with MetaMask are Trezor users using a passphrase. So the unholy trinity of bad user experience seem to be Trezor plus passphrase plus MetaMask has a high chance of a screw up that'll cost you a lot of money. The other interesting thing I'll just mention about passphrases is particularly for wallets like Ledger and Ellipal, you can actually save the BIP39 passphrase on device, which is really good for usability. The challenge that I see with users for these wallets when they come with passphrase issues is that they will have set a passphrase when they set their wallet up, but because they aren't constantly re-entering the passphrase all the time, they can forget their passphrase entirely or even forget that they were using it. For users who have issues with a passphrase, it's mostly a case of using BTC Recover to try and work out what the passphrase was. People often will have confused their passphrase with their device pin. Sometimes people will have put in their seed phrase, or they will have just put in a typo somewhere along the way with their passphrase or just misremembered what they used. The next most common issue that I see are faulty seed phrases. And this is mostly where folk have maybe lost a couple of words in their seed phrase. Maybe their backup was damaged, maybe their writing was illegible, or maybe they just have a small typo. And the crazy thing here is that literally everyone who has typos in their seed will swear black and blue that they were really thorough writing it down. There were no mistakes, they triple checked everything. But when you actually, run BTC Recover and it spits out the correct seed, lo and behold, there is a typo. And often it is as small as, one character being wrong that can lead to a totally different BIP39 word. So there's a few major takeaways that I think can be helpful. The first and most obvious thing is try and write your words neatly. BIP39 seed phrases are not case sensitive, so you can just write all the words in big uppercase letters, no fancy cursive, anything like that, because you need to make sure you can read it. The other major one that is part of this is use the recovery check feature of your hardware wallet. Basically, all decent hardware wallets allow you to do this in some way. There is simply no substitute for fully verifying all of your seed words to make sure your backup is going to work when you need it. Most vendors still cut corners in validating your seed words when you first set the device up. So if you're using a device like a Trezor or Jade or something like that that doesn't validate all of the words, you must run a full recovery check to make sure they are all correct. The other thing that working on faulty seeds has really hammered home to me is the difference between what we see and what we perceive. In that sometimes people will have made a mistake transcribing their seed, but your brain will just sort of, auto-correct that for you if you write the seed down, retranscribe it, do all of these things in one sitting. So generally my suggestion to people is it can be a really good idea to run your recovery check to verify all your backups, the next day. So you've had enough time just to not have all of the things that you've just done immediately fresh in your mind, and you might actually spot mistakes that you would not have spotted if you'd done it all in one sitting. The other big one I get a lot of is folk who have mixed up their backups. And this is why I say, documentation isn't sexy or fancy or impressive, but you really have to do it. Make sure you label your seeds in some way. And this often is compounded by people who are using passphrases who might have used a different passphrase with different seeds, and they've essentially gotten mixed up which seed they're using with which passphrase and are unable to access their funds. The other thing that I've seen come up a number of times is don't throw out old seeds. I see a number of people who will accidentally, get their seeds mixed up. They'll throw out the wrong backup, or they'll do something like send funds to an old wallet address that they no longer have the backup for. Do not throw seed backups out. You might choose to keep like digital backups of seeds you aren't using anymore, but please just take the time to label your backups and store all of the old ones, hoard them. And maybe put a note there that says, which hardware or software you're using it with, which date you started and stopped using it, and things like that. Again, just so you don't accidentally throw out the wrong backup or have yourself in a situation where sending funds to an old address, maybe you'd whitelisted on your exchange or something like that, is for a seed that you no longer have. The other big one that I see about once a month is 12-word seeds that have typos that still have a correct checksum. Simply put, the checksum for 12-word seeds is terrible. It is too weak to be useful. And basically, this is why, while a 12-word seed might have technically enough entropy, it is probably still not the best choice in terms of overall safety. And the issue with these sorts of situations is a user will enter in the seed, their wallet will accept it as correct, and they can't work out where their funds have gone. And just last week, I did one where the word common and canon were in the seed, and that was the difference that resulted in, again, two 12-word seeds, both with a valid checksum, though one had the funds, one didn't. Like, honestly, 12-word seeds are just not worth the hassle. If you are using a 12-word seed, be sure to write down some additional way that you can know you've got the right seed, something like a wallet fingerprint or something else like that. The checksum for 12-word seeds is simply not good enough. The last piece of advice with seeds is don't go messing with your seed. The most common thing I see where folk have tampered with their seeds is to do things like swap a few pairs of words around and maybe swap one of the words out with something different entirely. And the thing is, this actually adds almost zero extra security. BTC Recover can normally solve that in a few seconds, but it's still been complex enough that users have forgotten what they did, ended up with non-working wallets and started panicking. If you want to add a layer of security to your physical backups, just use a passphrase. But be sure to write it down, don't just memorize it, and test it. The next big category of issues that I see are forgotten passwords, and this is a big one, just like passphrases. And it's interesting here to see that blockchain.com, or previously blockchain.info wallets, are dramatically overrepresented here. They were popular back in the day, and there are still weird bugs where the correct password will not open your wallet correctly, and that is still something that I see a lot of. So again, if you're using a wallet password and you have, for whatever reason, chosen not to write down your recovery seed, you need to write down the password somewhere. Don't just memorize it. One of the other really big ones I see is people sending funds to addresses on the wrong network. And this is actually one that has changed a bit over the years. A couple of years back, this was mostly about people who had done things like send Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash to Bitcoin addresses, particularly legacy SegWit addresses that start with a 3 or vice versa. Whereas now, the biggest issue that I see is for Ethereum clones that all share the same address format. And this gets worse every time an exchange launches their own EVM chain and pushes their users towards it to save fees. It's just a complete disaster. And it's really one of those things that highlights that, particularly in terms of all these Ethereum clones, like, no one is designing for safety at a protocol level. It's just completely, unbelievably bad. And this whole thing just creates complete carnage for users because the address formats are identical, and most of the time a wallet will just send the funds straight to an incompatible address with no warning whatsoever. It's a complete mess. And this is where it's also worth mentioning that the numbers I've talked about so far are mostly for situations where people are happy to pay for help. Whereas if we include things like the YouTube views and the number of comments for videos, so essentially all of my free support channels, this issue of sending funds to the wrong chain is easily the biggest issue that I see. And you can even just look at the video numbers here and see that this whole Axie Infinity thing from a few years back was a great example of this. It was a complete disaster from start to finish. And that's even before the smart contract that bridged between the different networks that this Axie was using got hacked. So the key takeaway here is, say, if you are dabbling with multiple cryptocurrencies, especially those that share address formats, especially if they're all Ethereum clones and you access them all through the same wallet software, you are asking for trouble. And there is no solution other than sending a small test transfer first, making sure it works, and then sending the rest. The big challenge here is your exchanges will generally not help you if you send unsupported tokens or coins to their deposit address. So just the basics of your wallet or the protocol of the cryptocurrency you're using, protecting you from accidentally sending funds in ways that causes unrecoverable losses, I think is one of the hugest risks of altcoining that frankly no one really talks about. But to me, I see it a lot, and it's not getting any better. So let's just talk about some general takeaways to cover off the rest of the categories as well. So again, the first thing that I mentioned at the start is that survivorship bias is huge. Most of the people who you hear talking about the space, particularly influencers and things like that, they're people who survived, they're people who maybe are trying to sell you something or promote the service or whatever. They have no incentive to talk about the people who didn't make it. And again, the people who don't make it tend not to share their stories just because of the shame that's involved and the way that I think our community will blame them generally when these things sort of happen. The other big one is that scammers are everywhere. And these two categories here of hardware or software issues are often used to disguise scams. There are many users who don't actually realize they have been scammed because maybe they've done something like, deposit funds into a fake exchange and they wonder why the withdrawal doesn't work. And, the scammer will just say, oh, there's something wrong with your hardware or software. Or maybe users have been sent, a fake token for whatever it happens to be. And when they send that to a real exchange, they wonder why the funds don't appear. And then again, the scam says, oh, there's just something wrong with your wallet. The other big one is that malicious software is everywhere. And this is why hardware wallets are very important. I get so many requests from people who, were using some kind of browser-based wallet that all of a sudden just gets emptied out. Sometimes in response to people who have actual issues, if they post on somewhere like Reddit or YouTube, you'll get a wave of scammers who will send you private messages or public messages wanting you to download, a fixed version of the wallet software or enter your seed into a website or something like that. So malicious software is a complete disaster and it will take everything you have in seconds. Another big one is the complexity is the enemy, and a good user experience makes all the difference. Things like the Trezor passphrase issues that I already mentioned, things like the Cold Card Mark IV, low entropy seeds that could be created a little while back, all of these are examples of user experience failures. Good user experience makes best practices easy. There is an idea in sort of computer science that simplicity is security, and this can be applied to just about every aspect of your self-custody. One of the big ones I think that can immediately introduce a lot of complexity for people is that question of, do you have an air-gapped hardware wallet or a USB or Bluetooth device? And there are arguments about the theoretical risks of connecting over USB, but the thing is that no one seems to really take seriously the extreme user experience differences that happen here. So for example, if you have decided to switch from something like a Ledger or a Trezor to something air-gapped, but you don't take the time to verify your receive address on your air-gapped hardware device every single time in the way that non-air-gapped devices like Ledgers and Trezors force you to do, you've actually probably decreased your security overall. It's all well and good to have good intentions to do the process securely and thoroughly every single time, but if you realize that just you are lazy like most people and you just default to just checking it on your watch-only wallet, not worrying about verifying on the hardware, you really need to ask the question of whether that solution is the best for you. It's really important to say the most complex hardware and software on the market is not the best for everyone. Simply having vendor-supplied software like what you get with Ledger, Trezor, Jade, Bitbox02 that holds your hand as you set up your device, as you use it, that actually limits what you can do and limits the possible ways you can screw up. This can make all the difference, particularly if you're new. Advanced users might want something more and might want to use third-party software to do all sorts of things, and that's fine, as long as you actually have the discipline to do the extra work. And there's no reason to shame people into doing something that is too complex for them. The other big takeaway is that you really just need to be able to take your time. Almost all of the scams that you see around in the space rely on trying to make you rush or panic or do something like that. They'll throw a scary message in your browser that says something wrong with your hardware wallet or your software wallet, and you need to enter your seed quickly. And all of these things to try and make you panic into doing something really insecure. Rush and panic are the enemy. You need to be able to take your time. You also need to make sure you take your time when setting up your wallet, when verifying your backups, when testing your setups to make sure that they work. And when I say take your time, part of that is also giving yourself time to learn. I think one of the most damaging things with the whole Ledger Recover debacle, basically 2 years back now, was the panic with which some people were sort of moving off their Ledger devices onto something else and making all sorts of stupid mistakes along the way. And I would say to you, if you're at a place where you want to move from having your funds on an exchange to having them in a self-custody wallet, or if you're wanting to move from a software wallet to a hardware wallet, or into a new hardware wallet, don't do this thing in a panicked rush. And it doesn't even have to be something you do all at once. There's nothing at all wrong with, setting it up, sending a small amounts of funds there, making sure you're comfortable with how it all works. And then once you're happy that everything's working, all your backups are working, you're comfortable with how it works, then you send the rest. It doesn't have to be this all or nothing thinking that you have to move all of your funds in one shot on the very first transaction. Take your time. And the other thing that relates to this is if you get into trouble with your hardware wallet or your software wallet, you just need to stop. If things don't work, just stop. Do not factory reset your hardware wallet straight away. It's not like a smartphone. Factory reset will almost never actually fix it. Do not just uninstall and delete all of your wallet software and all of these other things as the first step. And if you are going to go start uninstalling wallet software and those sorts of things, make sure you back everything up first. Don't just go wiping everything. And if you have a meaningful amount of money stored on a hardware wallet and someone's telling you to factory reset it, you should just buy another one and just leave your other one intact that's not working correctly. There are just way too many people where by the time they have got to me, they not only have an issue with their passphrase, but then they wiped their device and realized they have a problem with their seed phrase. And because they've already wiped all their wallet software, they have no idea what addresses they had, what script types they were using, or any of these other things. So, just taking your time, not just wiping everything and resetting everything as the first step, I think is really important, because the key thing you have to avoid is trying to make things worse. And again, if you're in a panic and you just start wiping and deleting everything, you're almost certainly going to make things worse. Take your time. The other one to mention is document everything. Your memory cannot be trusted. Simply put, it doesn't matter how good your system for memorizing things are, no one plans to have a car accident, no one plans to have a head injury, no one plans to have an illness or sickness or something like that that dramatically affects your memory. You need to write things down. The other thing is to say on this is estate planning matters. I do get people sometimes who come to me saying, this person X, Y, or Z, we think they had, some funds. We're not sure how much. We're not sure what they stored it on. We haven't found any backups or anything like that. Is there anything you can do to help? And the answer is pretty much no. So taking the time to write things down is good not only for yourself, but also if you're wanting to sort of pass these funds on to others, is an important part of that process. And the last thing I'm going to mention is that standards matter, and open source standards are even better. Simply put, when you're setting your wallet up, you should just assume that your wallet vendor will not be around 10 years from now. And if you look at the changelog for BTC Recover, you'll see that I actually do a lot of work, reverse engineering old wallets that don't work anymore, that aren't around for anymore. So basically, you need to manually dump the private keys out of them and use them with something more modern. And the thing is, if you're using open standards like BIP39, it's actually no problem to take that seed and use it in another piece of hardware or software. And even if BIP39 wallets would have become a lot less common. The fact that there are lots of implementations of BIP39 that are open source floating around on the internet makes it really easy to reverse engineer something that will work, even far into the future. Because I've simply lost count of the number of old wallets and things people have that use some obscure, proprietary or undocumented setup, and those funds are basically gone. Take the time to understand what standards your backups use and how you would use them with different hardware or software if the vendor you're using wasn't around anymore. All right, summary time. So I often see folks saying things on Twitter, like how hard is it to store 12 words? But the problem is that while the technical aspects of self-custody aren't super complicated, what makes it hard is the consequences of making a mistake. They are catastrophic. Where we are right now feels a little bit like if your TV or your computer had no case and you had mains voltage wires and parts just exposed but not labeled, and something in the warning manual telling you, don't touch a few of these general spots on the case or something bad might happen. That's pretty much where we are right now. You touch the wrong part, mess it up, you die. And while things are much better than when I entered the space over a decade ago now, we really do still have a long way to go. The fact that this channel exists pretty much is a testament to that. Though with the continued innovations on both the hardware and the software side in terms of making this easier to use, I do still think we are moving in the right direction, which is still very good. I don't make this video to try and scare people off self-custody because I do think that self-custody is still very important and that the unknown and uncontrollable risks of custodial options, like just leaving your funds on an exchange, can even be worse than any of the things we've talked about here. If you have any questions about the material that I've talked about in this video, definitely leave a reply in the comment section. I do my best to answer all of them. And if you want private support or trusted recovery, you can actually request that at my website here, though hopefully you actually never need to talk to me at all about this kind of thing. So other than that, stay safe. Thanks for watching. I hope that was helpful. Hit like if you think that other people would find this video useful, and hit subscribe if you'd like to be kept in the loop about future content I make that helps people stay safe in the crypto space and to recover if they get into trouble. If you have any questions about this video or a topic that you'd like me to cover, just leave a reply.